In the heart of Iowa's rolling plains, Father John Thompson's withered hands traced the familiar wooden cross that hung from his neck. The small town of Cedar Grove had been his home for over 3 decades, and every crack in the church's ancient walls told a story of community, faith, and perseverance. Despite his remarkable success in transforming the local parish into a beacon of hope for thousands, John remained steadfast in his humble demeanor, wearing the same old black cassock he'd worn since his ordination. What few people knew was that behind his unassuming appearance lay a brilliant mind for philanthropy and community development. Through years of dedicated work, strategic partnerships, and careful management of donations, John had built a network of charitable programs that stretched far beyond Cedar Grove's modest boundaries. The small church's initiatives now touched lives across multiple states, though most benefactors never met the simple priest behind it all. Sarah Martinez, the church's young administrative assistant, often marveled at how Father John could switch from consoling a grieving widow to negotiating million-dollar grants with corporate executives, all while maintaining his gentle demeanor and wearing those scuffed old shoes. "Father," she said one morning, watching him sort through a stack of donation reports, "have you ever considered upgrading your image a bit? You're handling significant responsibilities now." John's eyes crinkled with amusement as he looked up from the papers. "My dear, when God measures a person's worth, he doesn't look at the price tag on their clothes." Then, his expression turned thoughtful. "Though speaking of responsibilities, I've been considering something that might surprise you." He pulled out a folder from his desk drawer, revealing glossy brochures of private jets. Sarah's eyes widened as she realized what she was seeing. "Our programs have grown so much," John explained, "and I spend more time traveling between communities than actually serving them. A private aircraft would allow me to visit 3 locations in the time it currently takes to reach one." The logic was sound, but Sarah couldn't help feeling concerned. She'd worked in Chicago's financial district before finding her calling in charity work, and she knew how the elite aviation world operated. "Father, the private aviation industry, it's not like our community here. They can be quite judgmental." John smiled, the same serene smile he wore when facing any challenge. "Then perhaps they need someone to remind them that true value isn't found in appearances." He stood up, gathering his worn leather briefcase. "I'm flying to Chicago next week. There's a particular aircraft that would be perfect for our needs." As Sarah watched him prepare for his journey, she couldn't shake the feeling that this decision would set in motion events that would challenge not just Father John's patience, but the very principles he'd spent a lifetime teaching others. What she didn't realize was that in the gleaming towers of Chicago's business district, forces were already in motion that would turn a simple aircraft purchase into a test of character that would captivate the nation. If this story interests you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give it a like. Tell us which city you're watching from. Let's continue. The pristine marble floors of Chicago Executive Aviation reflected the morning sun as Father John stepped through its glass doors. The contrast between his humble attire and the opulent surroundings couldn't have been starker. Executive jets worth millions gleamed under spotlights, while well-heeled customers in bespoke suits discussed deals over imported coffee. Bradley Winchester III, the company's top salesman, was having his usual successful morning when he spotted the peculiar figure entering his domain. His perfectly manicured hand paused midway through signing a commission check as he watched the priest approach the reception desk. "This should be interesting," he muttered to his colleague, adjusting his Rolex. "Welcome to Chicago Executive Aviation," Bradley announced with practiced charm, though his eyes betrayed his skepticism. "Are you perhaps lost, Father?" The question drew subtle snickers from nearby customers. John met Bradley's condescending smile with unwavering dignity. "Not at all, Mr. Winchester. I'm here to purchase a private jet. Specifically, the Citation Longitude. I've researched its range and fuel efficiency, and it seems perfect for our needs." Bradley's smile faltered for a moment before widening artificially. "The Longitude? That's our premium model, Father. Perhaps I could show you something more appropriate. We have some lovely promotional posters of it." Before John could respond, a familiar voice cut through the tension. John? Father John Thompson? Michael Chen, dressed in an impeccable suit that marked him as part of this world, strode across the showroom. To everyone's surprise, he embraced the priest warmly. "Michael, my boy. I hadn't heard you'd moved to Chicago." John's face lit up with genuine joy. "Wait, you know him?" Bradley interrupted, his composure slipping slightly. Michael turned, his friendly demeanor cooling noticeably. "Know him? This man changed my life. When my family lost everything in the financial crisis, his programs provided the education that got me where I am today. I'm now the CFO of Midwest Trust Banking." He paused, studying Bradley's face. "And I'm quite interested to hear why you're treating one of the most successful philanthropic developers in the Midwest like a lost tourist." The atmosphere in the showroom shifted palpably. Bradley's colleagues whispered among themselves, smartphones discreetly checking Father John's credentials. But Bradley, his pride wounded, doubled down. "With all due respect, Mr. Chen, we have protocols. We can't just sell multi-million-dollar aircraft to anyone who walks in, regardless of their connections." Michael's expression hardened, but John placed a gentle hand on his former protege's shoulder. "It's all right, Michael. Perhaps Mr. Winchester would be more comfortable if I demonstrated my credentials." He reached into his worn briefcase, retrieving not just bank statements that made Bradley's eyes widen, but letters of recommendation from some of the country's most prominent philanthropic organizations. What nobody in the showroom realized was that this moment would spark a chain of events that would shake the foundations of Chicago's elite social circles and force everyone involved to confront their deepest prejudices. Sarah's warning about the private aviation world had been right, but even she couldn't have predicted how this confrontation would transform not just Father John's mission, but the lives of everyone it touched. The following days unleashed a storm that nobody had anticipated. What began as a simple aircraft purchase had evolved into a viral sensation when security footage of Bradley's treatment of Father John leaked online. Emma Torres, a junior employee at Chicago Executive Aviation, had witnessed everything and couldn't stand by silently. The video spread like wildfire across social media platforms. Comment sections exploded with debates about privilege, appearance-based discrimination, and the role of religious figures in modern society. Some defended Bradley's caution as standard business practice, while others rallied behind Father John's dignity in the face of prejudice. Michael Chen, driven by both gratitude and a sense of justice, reached out to his extensive network. Soon, major news outlets picked up the story, featuring interviews with countless individuals whose lives had been transformed by Father John's programs. From recovering addicts who'd found purpose through his rehabilitation initiatives to students who'd received scholarships from his educational funds, the testimonials painted a picture of a man whose impact far exceeded his humble appearance. The spotlight suddenly turned to Bradley Winchester III, whose polished facade began to crack under scrutiny. Investigative reporters uncovered a pattern of discriminatory practices at Chicago Executive Aviation, with multiple instances of qualified buyers being dismissed based on their appearance or background. Sarah watched the unfolding events from Cedar Grove with growing concern. "Father," she said during one of their daily calls, "this is becoming bigger than just buying a plane. People are calling you a symbol of resistance against corporate elitism." John's response was characteristically measured. "Sometimes, Sarah, God puts us in situations not just for our own growth, but to help others confront their prejudices. This isn't about me anymore, it's about everyone who's ever been judged by their cover rather than their content." Meanwhile, in Chicago, the corporate machine had sprung into action. Chicago Executive Aviation's PR team scrambled to contain the damage, offering John a significant discount on the aircraft and a public apology. But when the offer arrived, accompanied by a confidentiality agreement, John did something that surprised everyone: he refused. "This isn't about getting a better deal," he explained to Michael over coffee in a quiet Chicago diner. "It's about addressing the root of the problem." His words carried the weight of decades spent fighting for social justice, though usually through much quieter means. As pressure mounted, Bradley's carefully constructed world began to unravel. His stellar sales record couldn't shield him from the growing scandal, and his attempts to justify his actions only made things worse. But it was a private conversation, accidentally overheard by Emma, that would change everything. A conversation that would reveal connections between Bradley Winchester III and Father John's past that nobody could have anticipated. Emma Torres stood frozen in the darkened hallway of Chicago Executive Aviation, her heart pounding as Bradley Winchester's voice echoed from his office. She hadn't meant to eavesdrop, but what she heard made it impossible to walk away. "Mother, you don't understand," Bradley was saying, his usually confident voice trembling. "This priest, when you see his photo in the papers, don't you recognize him? It's him, the same Father John Thompson who took care of Grandmother Catherine in Cedar Grove 30 years ago, when our family lost everything in the farm crisis." Emma's hand flew to her mouth, stifling a gasp. Through the crack in the door, she could see Bradley slumped in his leather chair, all pretense of superiority gone. "He never knew who I was," Bradley continued. "I was only 6 when Grandmother sent me to Chicago to live with Father after everything happened. But I never forgot him. How could I? He was the only one who stood by our family when everyone else abandoned us." The revelation hit Emma like a thunderbolt. Bradley Winchester III, the embodiment of corporate elitism, was actually Bradley Winchester Carter, the grandson of Catherine Carter, whose farm had been the largest in Cedar Grove before the crisis of '93. The same crisis that had inspired Father John to start his first community support program. Meanwhile, across town, Michael Chen was piecing together another part of the puzzle. Diving deep into old records, he discovered something that changed everything. The initial funding for Father John's charitable foundation had come from an anonymous donor, Catherine Carter herself. She had sold her remaining jewelry to help start the program that would go on to help thousands, including Michael's own family. The next morning, as Father John prepared to meet with his legal team, Sarah called with urgent news. "Father, you need to see this," she said, her voice shaking. "I was going through the old parish records, and I found letters, dozens of them. They're from Bradley's grandmother, Catherine. She wrote to you every month for years after she moved away, but they were missorted and never reached you." John sat heavily in his chair as Sarah read portions of the letters. Catherine had written about her grandson, about her hopes that he would overcome the trauma of their family's downfall. The final letter, dated just before her passing, contained a confession. She had been secretly donating to John's causes for years, hoping to help others avoid her family's fate. She wanted her grandson to learn the value of humility and compassion. Sarah's voice cracked as she read. She believed that losing everything had taught their family an important lesson about judging others by their appearances. As John absorbed this information, Emma Torres was making a decision that would shake Chicago's corporate world to its core. She had recorded Bradley's phone conversation, not for blackmail, but because she finally understood the true story that needed to be told. A story not just about prejudice and redemption, but about how the past reaches forward to shape our present in ways we never expect. What no one yet realized was that Catherine Carter had left one final letter, sealed and entrusted to her attorney with specific instructions about when it should be delivered. And that moment was rapidly approaching, promising to bring one more earth-shattering revelation that would transform this tale of prejudice and redemption into something far more profound. The law office of Marshall, Benson and Associates stood like a sentinel in downtown Chicago, its windows reflecting the afternoon sun. Inside, Eleanor Marshall, the firm's senior partner, held a weathered envelope in her trembling hands. For 30 years, she had honored Catherine Carter's request to keep this letter sealed until specific conditions were met. Now, watching the news unfold about Father John and Bradley Winchester, she knew the time had come. The letter wasn't just a confession, it was a key to unlocking a legacy that would reshape everything. Eleanor called an emergency meeting, bringing together Father John, Bradley, Michael, and Emma. Sarah joined via video conference from Cedar Grove, her face tense with anticipation. As they gathered in the firm's mahogany-paneled conference room, Eleanor began to read Catherine's final message. The revelations came like waves, each one more astonishing than the last. Catherine had not just been a wealthy farmer, she had been a silent philanthropist, working behind the scenes to support numerous causes. But her greatest achievement had been orchestrating a long-term plan that was only now coming to fruition. "My dearest Bradley," the letter began, "if you're hearing this, it means you've finally crossed paths with Father John again. What you don't know is that your position at Chicago Executive Aviation wasn't just luck or privilege. I arranged it, through old family connections, knowing that someday Father John would come there. You see, I needed you to understand something essential about judgment, pride, and redemption." Bradley's face paled as the letter continued. His grandmother had deliberately positioned him in the private aviation industry, knowing that Father John's growing charitable network would eventually require air transportation. She had predicted, with remarkable accuracy, how her grandson's acquired prejudices would clash with the priest's humble appearance. But the most stunning revelation was yet to come. Catherine had established a trust fund, managed by Eleanor's firm, that had grown to an enormous sum over 3 decades. The conditions for its release were specific. It would only be unlocked when Bradley and Father John's paths crossed again, and only if Bradley demonstrated the same prejudices that their family had once faced. This trust, Eleanor explained, looking up from the letter, is now worth over $50 million. And according to Catherine's wishes, it's to be divided equally between Father John's charitable foundation and a new initiative focused on combating discrimination in corporate America, with the stipulation that Bradley must lead this initiative. The room fell silent as the magnitude of Catherine's plan sank in. She had orchestrated a 30-year lesson in humility and understanding, using her own grandson's prejudices as the catalyst for change. But there was one final twist that no one saw coming, a revelation about Catherine's true connection to Father John that would challenge everything they thought they knew about family, faith, and destiny. The final pages of Catherine's letter brought tears to everyone's eyes. She revealed that Father John wasn't just a kind priest who had helped her family, he was her brother's son, making him Bradley's great-uncle. They had been separated as children when John's parents faced financial hardship and had to give him up for adoption. Catherine had kept this secret her entire life, watching from afar as her nephew grew into a man of God, helping others just as he had unknowingly helped his own family. The revelation sent shockwaves through the room. Bradley stared at Father John, seeing him with new eyes, not as a shabby priest seeking to buy a luxury item, but as the uncle he never knew he had, a man who embodied the very values his grandmother had tried to instill in him. "I kept this secret," Catherine's letter concluded, "because I wanted both of you to find each other not through obligation, but through a genuine transformation of heart. Bradley, my dear grandson, your journey from prejudice to understanding was the final test. And Father John, your unwavering dignity in the face of discrimination proved that you are truly your father's son, my brother's son." The story exploded across national media, but not as a scandal. Instead, it became a powerful narrative about family, redemption, and the long arc of justice. Bradley, deeply moved by his grandmother's wisdom and his own journey, transformed Chicago Executive Aviation into a model of inclusive business practices. The company's new motto, "Judge by character, not appearance," became a rallying cry for corporate reform. Father John did eventually get his private jet, but not from Chicago Executive Aviation. Instead, he and Bradley worked together to establish a revolutionary new program, a fleet of charitable aircraft serving communities in need across the country. They named it Catherine's Wings, in honor of the woman who had orchestrated this remarkable reunion. Sarah, watching the changes unfold from Cedar Grove, realized that their small town's legacy would now touch lives in ways they never imagined. The parish office, once a humble space for local charity work, became the headquarters for a national movement combining corporate social responsibility with grassroots community service. Michael Chen, moved by the entire experience, established a mentorship program at Midwest Trust Banking, specifically designed to support professionals from underprivileged backgrounds. Emma Torres was promoted to head of corporate communications at the newly reformed Chicago Executive Aviation, where she worked tirelessly to share their story of transformation with the world. As Father John stood on the tarmac months later, Watching his great-nephew Bradley teach local youth about aviation careers, he fingered the old wooden cross around his neck, the same one he'd worn for decades. It had been a gift, he now knew, from his birth father, passed down through Catherine. The cross, like their family story, had come full circle. In the end, Catherine Carter's grand plan had achieved something remarkable. It had turned a moment of prejudice into a catalyst for lasting change, reunited a family torn apart by circumstance, and proved that true value lies not in appearances, but in the content of one's character and the legacy they choose to build. End of story. Dear viewers, we hope this story of Father John and Bradley has touched your hearts. Their journey reminds us that transformation and redemption can come from the most unexpected places. If you'd like to experience more powerful stories like this one, please subscribe to our channel and give this video a thumbs up. Share your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear how this story resonated with you. Remember, every day we bring you unique narratives that explore the complexity of human relationships and the power of understanding. Don't miss our upcoming content. Your next favorite story might be just a click away.